Menka Gomis was born in France, but has decided his future lies in Senegal, where his parents were born. The 39-year-old is part of an increasing number of French Africans who are leaving France, blaming the rise in racism, discrimination, and nationalism. BBC Africa has investigated this phenomenon, being referred to as a silent exodus, to find out why people like Mr. Gomis are disillusioned with life in France. The Parisians set up a small travel agency that offers packages, mainly to Africa, aimed at those wanting to reconnect with their ancestral roots, and now has an office in Senegal. I was born in France. I grew up in France, and we know certain realities. There's been a lot of racism. I was 6 and I was called the N-word at school. Every day, Mr. Gomis, who went to school in the southern port city of Marseille, tells the BBC World Service, "I may be French, but I also come from elsewhere." Mr. Gomis's mother moved to France when she was just a baby and cannot understand his motivation for leaving family and friends to go to Senegal. "I'm not just leaving for this African dream," he explains, adding it is a mixture of responsibility he feels towards his parents' homeland and also opportunity. Africa is like the Americas at the time of the gold rush. I think it's the continent of the future. It's where there's everything left to build, everything left to develop. The links between France and Senegal, a mainly Muslim country and former French colony, which was once a key hub in the transatlantic slave trade, are long and complex. A recent BBC Africa investigation met migrants in Senegal willing to risk their lives in dangerous sea crossings to reach Europe. Many of them end up in France where, according to the French Office for the Protection of Refugee and Stateless Persons, OFPRA, a record number sought asylum last year. Around 142,500 people applied in total, and about a third of all requests for protection were accepted. It is not clear how many are choosing to do the reverse journey to Africa, as French law prohibits gathering data on race, religion, and ethnicity. But research suggests that highly qualified French citizens from Muslim backgrounds, often the children of immigrants, are quietly immigrating. Those we met told us attitudes towards immigration were hardening in France, with right-wing parties wielding more influence. Since their appointment last month, Prime Minister Michel Barnier and Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau have pledged to crack down on immigration, both legal and illegal, by pushing for changes to the law domestically and at the European level. Fontagarassi has lived in France all her life and runs her own nursing practice in Villemomble, an outer suburb of Paris, but she is also planning a move to Senegal, the birthplace of her mother. Unfortunately, for quite a few years now in France, we've been feeling less and less safe. It's a shame to say it, but that's the reality, the 34-year-old tells the BBC. Being a single mother and having a 15-year-old teenager means you always have this little knot in your stomach. You're always afraid. Her wake-up call came when her son was recently stopped and searched by the police as he was chatting to his friends on the street. As a mother, it's quite traumatic. You see what happens on TV, and you see it happen to others. In June last year, riots erupted across France following the fatal shooting of 17-year-old Nahel Merzouk, a French national of Algerian descent who was shot by police. The case is still being investigated, but the riots shook the nation and reflected an undercurrent of anger that had been building for years over the way ethnic minorities are treated in France. A recent survey of Black people in France suggested 91% of those questioned had been victims of racial discrimination. In the wake of the riots, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, called on France to address issues of racial discrimination within its law enforcement agencies. The French Foreign Ministry dismissed the criticism, saying, "Any accusation of systemic racism or discrimination by the police in France is totally groundless. France and its police fight resolutely against racism and all forms of discrimination." However, according to French Interior Ministry statistics, racist crimes rose by a third last year, with more than 15,000 recorded incidents based on race, religion, or ethnicity. For schoolteacher Audrey Monzemba, who is of Congolese descent, such societal changes have become very anxiety-provoking. Early one morning, we join her on her commute through a multicultural and working-class community on the outskirts of Paris. With her young daughter, she makes her way by bus and train. But as she approaches the school where she works, she discreetly removes her headscarf under the hood of her coat. BBC, I want to go to work without having to remove my veil. Audrey Monzemba, schoolteacher. In secular France, Wearing a hijab has become hugely controversial, and 20 years ago they were banned in all state schools. It is part of the reason Ms. Monzemba wants to leave France, looking to move to Senegal where she has connections. I'm not saying that France isn't for me. I'm just saying that what I want is to be able to thrive in an environment that respects my faith and my values. I want to go to work without having to remove my veil, the 35-year-old says. A recent survey of more than 1,000 French Muslims who have left France to settle abroad suggests it is a growing trend. It follows a peak in Islamophobia in the wake of the 2015 attacks when Islamist gunmen killed 130 people in various locations across Paris. Moral panics around secularism and job discrimination are at the heart of this silent flight. Olivier Estevez, one of the authors of the report France, You Love It, But You Leave It, tells the BBC. Ultimately, this emigration from France constitutes a real brain drain, as it is primarily highly educated French Muslims who decide to leave, he says. Take Fatoumata Silla, 34, whose parents are from Senegal, as an example. When my father left Africa to come here, he was looking for a better quality of life for his family in Africa. He would always tell us, "Don't forget where you come from." The tourism software developer, who is moving to Senegal next month, says by going to set up a business in West Africa, she is showing she has not forgotten her heritage, though her brother Abdul, who like her was born in Paris, is not convinced. I'm worried about her. I hope she'll do okay, but I don't feel the need to reconnect with anything, he tells the BBC. My culture and my family is here. Africa is the continent of our ancestors, but it's not really ours because we weren't there. I don't think you're going to find some ancestral culture or an imaginary Wakanda, he says, referring to the technologically advanced society featured in the Black Panther movies and comic books. In Dakar, we met Salamata Kant, who founded the travel agency with Mr. Gomis, to find out what awaits French Africans like her who are choosing to settle in Senegal. When I arrived in Senegal 3 years ago, I was shocked to hear them call me Frenchie. Salamata Kant, travel agency co-founder based in Dakar. Ms. Kant swapped a high-paying banking job in Paris for the Senegalese capital. When I arrived in Senegal 3 years ago, I was shocked to hear them call me Frenchie, the 35-year-old says. I said to myself, okay, yes indeed, I was born in France, but I'm Senegalese like you. So at first, we have this feeling where we say to ourselves, damn, I was rejected in France, and now I'm coming here and I'm also rejected here. But her advice is, you have to come here with humility, and that's what I did. As for her experience as a businesswoman, she says it has been really difficult. I often tell people that Senegalese men are misogynistic. They don't like to hear that, but I think it's true. They have a hard time accepting that a woman can be a CEO of a company, that a woman can sometimes give orders to certain people, that I, as a woman, can tell a driver who is late, no, it's not normal that you're late. I think we have to prove ourselves a little more. Nonetheless, Mr. Gomis is excited as he awaits his Senegalese citizenship. The travel agency is going well, and he says he is already working on his next venture, a dating app for Senegal.